So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and to what I think is going to be the last video of the new year. I've actually had two replays on Helm's Deep, one of which I've already recorded, but I think I'm going to choose this one to be sort of the bookend to the year, purely because this one is a larger battle, so it seems a little bit more appropriate. So I hope that 2018 has been good to you, and I hope that 2019 will be even better, and hopefully with the addition of 0.97 and obviously Three Kingdoms coming out in the new year as well, just in February, hopefully I can do a couple more things with the channel. Even with the second half of my final university year, I hope that I'm able to keep the channel going and maybe grow it a little bit as well, just because I do enjoy doing this. It's certainly better than having a normal part-time job in retail at any rate. But we will be going through the army compositions now. We'll go through the defenders in just a moment, and based on the amount of armies in play, it's a 5v3 and it's just shy of 30,000 frames, so I assume the attackers are going to be extremely aggressive, which I like the idea of, I must say. Obviously, Helm's Deep is a very defensible fortress, so even when you're outnumbered by two armies, particularly with the armies on display here, all of which are very high quality armies, and when you have a lot of money to play with, Imladris, Lothlorien and Erebor can all be very, very deadly indeed. So I think actually the defenders do stand a pretty decent chance in this battle, but with sort of superior numbers, I see a lot of people make the same mistakes on Helm's Deep, where they commit a fair amount of their defences to the outer defence, or a fair amount of their resources to the outer defence, I should say, but not enough to slow down the attackers to a sufficient extent, and then they don't have enough in the final stand to actually pull out any sort of victory. We'll see if the defenders make that same mistake this time around. We'll start off with Stewed Balrog, who I believe sent me this replay. Again, it's quite hard. It was either him or Baconfish, but I'm sure it was Stewed Balrog. He's going to be playing as Angmar, obviously very good on the attack with the variety of sort of pushing units that they have. Also, they've got some decent higher tier infantry. Obviously, skirmishers are where they fall down. When you're on the attack in this sort of situation, you don't have to have too much in the way of skirmish power, so some Snaga Stalkers pushing the ram, just in case it is needed. Obviously, a very key part of Angmar's army in this sort of situation could be the Blackwatch Legion. Very good at pushing units out of the way, of course, but obviously in sustained combat, all of the Dwarven and Elven defenders are going to be able to do a very good job at killing off the Blackwatch Legion. They're not really designed for doing damage, they're just designed for disrupting formations. We also have the Guardians of Khand Dûm. All of these units actually have their armour upgraded, so going to be a little bit more resilient to the Elven archers. Obviously the Guardians of Khand Dûm with a good shield value anyway, and fairly high quality as it is, so hopefully we'll see the Guardians of Khand Dûm do a decent job on the front lines. The Witchram Hammerguard, which will be useful against the armoured defenders, but obviously getting the charge off within Helm's Deep is going to be difficult, so it's primarily just going to be their base damage, but obviously very, very strong. We've also got some Trolls of Gundabad, the slightly more offensive focused Trolls. Catapult as well. Again, on Helm's Deep it's very unsurprising to see a lot of artillery from the attackers and defenders, just to sort of deal with that lower wall, make it a little bit more difficult for the defenders, and obviously then the defenders can use the artillery against the attackers in the narrow choke points. Some more Snaga, some more Blackwatch Legion, and some more Guardians of Khand Dûm back here, and that's going to just about round out the Angmar army. Moving on then, just across the small river here we will have the central attacker, who is going to be Bloodbath McGrath, playing as Harad. So he's got several units of Haradrim Spearmen. This is very common to see as Harad, seeing them bring their very cheap, low quality spears so they can bring some quality elsewhere. And this is also true of their archers, which Bloodbath McGrath has brought some of them as well. Just back here he's got the Muhard Beast Hunters, which obviously as far as javelins go, pretty decent. Harad in general have got some good javelins that they can pick from. Some Dismounted Serpent Guard as well, which actually are usually overlooked by a lot of Harad armies. Usually they go for the quality and quantity split between the Haradrim Spearmen and a lot of then Trollmen and Demons of the Desert. The Dismounted Serpent Guard are sort of a middle of the road option. They are a little bit better actually than quite a lot of the other basic men-at-arms units from the Kingdoms of Men, but they're not sort of, they lack the theatre, I suppose, of the Trollmen of Harad. Just the Trollmen obviously are very, very strong indeed. Meanwhile in the middle here we have the Champions of Nathrat, which are obviously very, very powerful. Again, similar to the Witchram Hammerguard, that are going to find it very difficult to get their meaty charge bonus off within Helm's Deep, but their attack could still come in very, very handy. Obviously, in terms of Rangers can be a very key part of these siege battles, and from both an attacker or defender standpoint, and the Hashari Stalkers could have a very important part to play as the battle goes on. We do have some Trollmen over here as well, obviously again, more of an offensive focused unit in spite of their shields. Just over here we can see that the Hashari are pushing the ram, which is definitely not where they want to be, because the Hashari will get absolutely butchered by defensive archers, and they deserve better than that, because they are actually a very decent unit in melee with that skill. more Hishari, and some Demons of the Desert as well, so the hefty missile damage coming in from them, armor piercing of course. Then we have Yo Ranger 0123, who's going to be playing as Mordor, so he's got some Orc fodder. He's also got some Numenorian Shadow Guard, obviously again more Rangers, they can be very useful if they get in place. Olag Kai, Troll Drummers, 2 units of Nazgul, so once again Mordor seems to have gone for the double Nazgul approach with some Temple Executioners. So a relatively small, in fact a very small army from Mordor really, but I suppose he was counting on the fact that they do have 5 armies to work with, so he's gone very quality heavy. Mountain Trolls as well, he does still have the Black Legion, so that gives them another great shield unit for pushing, and some Orc Javelins as well with some more Orc fodder. So overall a very small army, but a very quality focused one, so we'll see if that works well alongside the Haradrim and Angmar here from the front. And then the 2 armies out wide, which are going to take a little longer to get into position. We have the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, who appear to have fallen to the dark side. We have some 4th Legion Shield Guard. Obviously in this patch Khazad-dûm are very, very powerful, so that's going to certainly help the attackers here. 3rd Legion, Khazad-dûm Reclaimers out wide, 2nd Legion. A lot of the Legion units, again some Hammers of Gundabad, Warriors of Khazad-dûm as well. More 4th Legion, and then back here some more Hammers of Gundabad, some Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, and then the Mithril Guard, which is going to be where Balin is. And then finally, from an attacking perspective, we have another Mordor army played by Captain Gervais. And again, this looks like to be a very similar setup actually, again going very quality heavy, with 2 units of Temple Executioners and 2 units of Nazgul, but obviously they are going to suffer a little bit in terms of a numbers sort of game, because obviously the rest of their army is mainly Orc Javelins and fodder. They do have some Olag High in here as well, but they're very bound up in their quality here, which could work against the attackers in the long run, because the defenders do have a lot of quality of their own, and while the Nazgul are very, very scary, there's also some Minas Morgul bodyguard in there, the defenders are going to have a lot of quality of their own. Speaking of which, as we head into the fortress itself, we have Ending Flame 0210 playing as Lothlorien. We have, I just find another unit, we have Dark Elven King playing as the Dwarves of Erebor, and finally, if I can find a part of his army, yes, we have Lord Finrod Felagund playing as Imladris. So, a mixture of their armies. We have some Lothlorien archers on the wall, which is very thematic considering the battle. Some Ethel Tirith, which of course they have got a new model, or at least the equivalent of their unit. It's got a new model in 0.97. Some Ironfoot crossbows as well. That AP damage, the stopping power, going to be very, very, very handy against the attackers. Some Lothlorien archers up here as well. Obviously a Dwarven catapult, which in this position can do a lot of damage to the approaching attackers. Less artillery from the attackers than I would expect as well. Sylvan Spears, which obviously, you know, good for Elven Spears. They'll be able to deal with a lot of the more basic attackers, but against some of the more quality units they'll struggle just because, you know, Spear Malices. Lothlorien Swordmasters, however, very, very useful indeed on the front line. Very, very skillful. A lot of damage potential from them. A couple of units of Maitha Ilaz Gelen as well, which, you know, the anti-cavalry bonus is obviously not going to be as important as the Javelins. And then over here, some Lothlorien Swordmasters with some Lothlorien Blades. So primarily Lothlorien down here, guarding the lower approach, and then over here we can see a huge blob, which I'm just going to have to try and see what's what. So we've got some Noritano warriors, Ironfoot crossbowmen, Eldar Quinga, Godhelin, more Heru Quinga. Over here we've got some Dwarven miners and some Erebor legionaries. Back here we've got all of the elite infantry units, I would imagine. The Karas Galadhon's Guardians, the Highborns, Sindar Archers, Blacklock Engineers, Sons of Durin, Obsidian Guard, all of the really strong stuff. So the defenders have got every chance of winning this with all of this quality. Gwathi Arthand, Heru Masil, which in spite of not being multiple HP can deal out incredible amounts of damage. There are Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin in there as well. Down here, I assume we'll have most of the sort of standard Dwarven and Elven infantry, as well as some cavalry hidden in here as well. Erebor Legionaries, so Imladris sentries as well, Gwathi Rockdor in there, so there's a lot of cavalry as well. It's obviously going to be very difficult to sort of tell these units apart with how closely packed they are. Imladris Guardians with the armour upgrade, but it does look as though Imladris and a bit of Lothlorien's cavalry are going to be taking the front foot here, and moving out, it could be to Harad and Angmar's. It could be tough on them, because I don't think they're going to be ready for this much cavalry. We shall see. The cavalry, with this much cavalry, they do need to make good use of it, the defenders, otherwise losing that much in terms of funds is going to put them in a really difficult spot as the match wears on, and attrition will probably work against them. But without further ado, let's begin. The cavalry also needs to leave the safety of Helm's Deep quickly, otherwise it's just going to get itself bottled up. But it does look as though that is going to happen, and obviously with knights like Gwathi Rockdor, they're going to have a real presence on the field, and also, you know, the Khazad-dûm and 2nd Mordor army are a long way away, so their support will we'll have to wait for a while. So the Noritano Cavalry, Gwathi Rockdor, there's also the Herumiro there as well. There was one unit at least of Lothlorien Mounted Company supporting them as well, so that's a lot of Lancers. That's obviously the Imladris Sentinels are Spear Cavalry, which there they are, but this is a lot of charge damage that they can have going for them. And going after individual targets is going to be important here, going after targets which are not going to deal too much damage to the Cav. Stuff like the Blackwatch Legion could be a very squishy target indeed for a charge, and it would also take away the ability for some of these armies to push with quite the same gusto that they usually do. Look at all this cavalry, it's Elven cavalry as well, especially when you've got units like the Gwathi Rockdor. Knights, obviously the kings of the battlefield, and Ladra Sentinels, Noritano Cavalry. Again, they could break off units like this Snaga Stalkers with consummate ease. And being aggressive like this is honestly a good idea in this situation, I think. With all of this cav, it's a bold army choice, but I think it could work in the defenders' favour as long as they, as long as they start using their cavalry more quickly than this. As you can see here, the Hashari Shadows getting into position. Excuse me. Excuse me. I think I'm losing my voice, which is really unfortunate. But we can see there that mounted rangers, so this is going to sort of necessitate a bit faster movement from the Elven Cavalry here, because it does look as though they've decided to dither a little bit. Here come the Olag High. Now the Olag High will be skewered off the charge by a bunch of these units. The Gwathi Rockdor do charge in. Again, not ideal cavalry use here. They've had a little bit more, they've had ample opportunity to start doing some real damage here to the attackers, and if the attackers asked them to ease off on the cavalry, I would have told the attackers to get stuffed, and I would have charged right into them with all this cav. The attackers have 2 more armies than the defenders. They already have enough of an advantage. Some of the Olag High did fall. Meanwhile, all of this cavalry is going to head to the top of the hill. Very Helm's Deep style, but this is also going to put them right into the clutches here of the advancing Mordor army from Captain Gervais, which, again, not too sure what the defenders are hoping to accomplish with their cavalry use here. They could have done a ton of damage early on to the Angmar and Haradrim armies, and instead they've held back a little bit, and that could be to their detriment, because they need this cavalry to do damage, otherwise they are going to be overwhelmed in the long run. Now this is a part of the map we very rarely see. Going to try and get right around to the back of the map. Sort of put their cavalry into the late game, maybe? Save the cavalry for the late game? Which is an interesting idea, but these trolls are just going to chase them all over the map, so maybe not the best of ideas. It's only a short game as well, so relatively speaking, I imagine the attackers are going to just sort of attack Helm's Deep quickly, regardless of whether this cavalry is in close proximity, as the Lothlorien Mounted Company rushes to catch up with the Imladris cavalry. Again, I'm not really sure what the deal was with that cavalry play. If I were him, I would have charged into Angmar and done huge damage, crippling one of the armies very quickly, if it were me. But now, unfortunately for the cavalry forces, the Olag High is sort of alerted. It's here. The Hashari Shadows are still chasing them as well, which those body-piercing projectiles are going to be real nasty. What is this unit as well? Again, this unit of Snaga Stalkers could have been charged by any one of those cavalry units, and it probably would have broken off very quickly. You can also see over here that the Trolls of Gundabad sort of getting ready to go into the rear section of the map. Again, I do hope it wasn't the attackers asking the defenders to not charge into their armies while they were still moving, because that speaks poorly of the attacker's sense of sportsmanship, because the whole purpose behind this particular army, with all of this cavalry, would have been to catch you off guard. And if you're denying the defenders the right to do that, then that's not good. But it could also equally just be poor decision making on the part of the players controlling this cavalry as well. We shall see. Again, all of this cavalry is still alive. I mean, it has taken losses to the point where, the attackers can be quite pleased with how they dealt with that. But I would also imagine that very soon we will start to see the assault on the keep itself, which there's a lot of elite units in there which they'll need to get through, but Both of the Mordor armies have also gone very quality heavy with lots of Nazgul, lots of Temple Executioners and Olag High. The numbers will be handled primarily, it looks like, by Harad actually. Light cavalry now in the back corner of the map. Attackers just sort of setting themselves up, and actually it does look as though they are going to wait for Khazad-dûm and Mordor to arrive. Khazad-dûm are sort of charging, which does mean they're going to exhaust their troops, but they will also get there a lot faster, of course. Yo Ranger also moving his Mordor army into position, getting ready to support. This Elven Cav loitering with intent. And there is the Gwathi Rock Door. The pride and joy of the Imladris cavalry line. They are called the Doombringers of Thrada, I believe, in 0.97. A lot of things have had sort of name changes and sort of some cosmetic changes as well. As Olag High did a good job for themselves, they only lost a couple of unit. What is this guy doing? Right, well he's bugged. He will forever be running in circles, I suppose. Yeah, if we have a look up here at the dead bodies, most of it is Elven Cav. Again, it was a very weak. I think, you know, the Imladris. You could see the Imladris cavalry was very hesitant to charge into those Olag High, and they only decided to commit when it was very clear that they weren't going to get away. And that's unfortunate, because if you charge into trolls, you can do a lot of damage off the charge. Obviously, in a sustained melee, trolls will start to inflict some pretty heavy casualties on your cav, but in that sort of situation, probably would have been a better idea to just sort of throw caution to the wind and try and kill the trolls off at least. I mean, the Elven Cav put itself in that position. Hopefully we see a little bit better use of this cavalry as time goes on, otherwise the defenders are going to have a tough time of it. They need to get good kills with this cavalry, because it's a lot of money, especially in Imladris. It's a lot of money that they've dumped into this cav force. One unit of each type of cav, a couple of units of Lothlorien Mounts Company to back them up. If they get too close, they're going to draw the ire of all the attacking rangers. The Hashari Stalkers already starting to fire. Again, the Imladris player really, this is all he needs to micro at this point in time, so there's really no excuse for this sort of sloppiness. Still in range as well. They need to get out of there. That's body piercing. Again, rangers don't do huge damage to cavalry when it's in motion, but the body piercing certainly helps. And this is just sort of free damage that they're able to get off. The Imladris Sentinels also have no shields, which is going to hurt them. Are they going to try and get them to become hidden? Because they're still in range. And they are going to hide, but there's the Haru Myro. The Lothlorien Mounts Company following them in, but yeah, this cavalry play is pretty woeful at this point in time, I would say. Especially when you've got nothing else to micro. It's quite uninspiring for what is to come from a defensive point of view. Hopefully the defense of the walls goes a little bit more smoothly from the off for them, because I know that if the attackers go forth and crush the defenders, I'm the one that's going to get it in the neck. And I would hope for a little bit more of a competitive fight for the last one of the year, if I'm honest. There's Snark still just waiting there. I think we're gonna go. I think I'm just gonna go up to. I'm not gonna make a cut. I'm just gonna go up to ×2 speed while the attackers deign to move into position. Again, this is not an overly long fight, so I'm actually a little bit surprised that the assault of the walls is taking this long to kick into gear. Again, it's very clear that that cavalry is back there, so they could just send over a bunch of Haradrim spearmen in loose to sort of flush them out, and then take a few more pot shots. There's those Demons of the Desert in there as well. Regular Hashari. Again, none of these. The chance to catch the attackers off guard has passed. At this point, they're sort of setting up a very nice defense around all their important stuff. Whereas early on, Angmar in particular, they were there for the taking. Black Watcher Legion, you could have routed off some of their trash units as well. You know, lots of damage could have been done, and you still could have saved cavalry for the late game as well. You could have done some initial damage and then sort of filtered them away. But as it turns out, far too conservative. People, people tend to play, you know, especially sort of players that are not sort of well known on the Discord, that sort of thing. You know, people tend to be far too conservative for my taste. They tend to try and sort of save their units far too long into the battle. Sometimes you just need to use them. Now you can see another unit of Rangers getting into position here, the Numenorian Shadow Guard, which again is going to make it even less of a tempting proposition to charge in. There's javelins all over the place. Yeah, so the cavalry is going to have to wait until very much the late game. Having said that, the onus is still on the attackers to mount an assault on the walls. If they just sort of sit here and wait for the defenders to try to sort of suicide their cavalry into their spears and javelins, you know, that is also something else which I would count against the attackers. You know, you have to be sporting here. You have 5 armies against 3. You know, it's on you to attack the fortress, not to just wait here and, you know, go about things in the way that's going to make things easiest for you. You know, there is the matter of having fun in these games as well. Here is Gervais's army, however, coming forward. All of the Mordor forces getting into place. The attackers are all in one area though, which, you know, could open them up to being hit by the catapult. But with the dwarves now here, you would imagine that this is where the attackers finally decide to move in. I'm going to go at times 6 speed until the attackers finally grab a hold of their balls and move in. This has moved far slower than I thought it was going to. I felt for sure when I looked at the numbers of the battle that this would be, the assault on the walls would begin relatively quickly. But as it is, it's taken far longer than I would have thought and hoped. Meanwhile, now it looks as though we're going to see the first wave, and Stewed Balrog is going to send up his Guardians of Kharndoom with the siege towers. The catapult is also, I assume, going to take down the other section of wall so they can start pouring in on foot as well. The Snaga moving up with their ram, the Orc Fodder moving up with theirs. The Elven Archers not engaging, which again, very understandable. Again, the infantry in here is of high quality, but it's also of significantly lower numbers than the attackers. That cavalry will need to play its part, otherwise the defenders are going to be overwhelmed, truly and utterly. I really hope my voice holds out. I can feel it giving out on me. Here comes the Snaga. Up the ramp. Moonwalking up the ramp, in fact. Now, will the defenders get these Lothlorien archers out of here? They will. I'm a little bit concerned about this lower defence as well. There's a lot of units of good quality over here, but there is also not enough of them, I think, to really make a fist of it down here. If the attackers really commit a lot down here to the lower section of the fortress, they will be able to take it with relative ease, I would think. Meanwhile, Noratirno warriors, as well as the Eldar Quinga, firing volley after volley into the approaching Guardians of Kharndoom, but with the armour upgraded, with their good shield values, they will be able to take a little bit more punishment than most other units in that regard, but even so, it's still a unit worthwhile going after because they are obviously of decent quality. Oh, I can really feel my voice going now. There's still a long way in this fight to go as well. Hopefully it holds on. See now the Lothlorien archers starting to fire, as are the Ethel Tirith. A lot of arrows flowing into the Guardians of Kharndoom, but again, they're absorbing it relatively well, and they will be able to get set up. And this will of course necessitate a fight on the walls, although the Guardians of Kharndoom are not going to be able to defeat units like the Lothlorien Blades, especially not after taking a lot of ranged fire like this. And now there is also a gap in the wall, which I imagine this is where a lot of the focus is going to be for the attackers as they move forwards. Stuff like the Blackwatch Legion is going to be able to push in here, do a lot of damage, although there are a lot of Lothlorien units down here, a lot of units of quality as well. Still more arrows flowing into the Guardians of Kharndoom, but now we have Swordmasters up here to meet them as well. What are these Swordmasters doing, actually? Just getting into position. I'm not sure what those siege towers are doing. Just trying to block the arrows? Perhaps. Meanwhile, the first melee engagements are happening. The Snaga Stalkers. Brave of them, but they aren't likely to get too much done. I mean, the Dwarven Miners are, in terms of infantry quality, certainly the lowest on the Dwarven roster. But even they will be able to do a good job against the Snaga, especially when the Snaga are isolated, so their morale is already taking hits. You can see in the background over there the Norreturno cavalry loitering with intent. Lothlorien sword masses in position. The Elven archers getting moved to a more advantageous position. Here comes the Guardians of Khan Dûm. Lothlorien archers firing point blank into them, as well as the Maitha Ilaz Gellan. But this is a risky move on the part of the defenders, because they're essentially allowing the attackers to occupy this space in here. Another point blank volley into the Guardians of Khan Dûm. Decent amount of damage is being done, as well as some point blank arrow fire as well. But the Maitha Ilaz Gellan are not exactly the strongest in a pure melee engagement, especially not against stuff like Guardians of Khan Dûm. There's a lot of skirmish fire going into these Guardians. You can see over here a unit of the Lothlorien spears blocking the advance of the Guardians of Khan Dûm. But as soon as reinforcements come up here, it's going to be pretty grisly. And again, now that the assault has begun, things are going to progress quickly, I would imagine. Lothlorien archers, a few of them, getting caught in melee. But also the Lothlorien blades attacking the Guardians of Khan Dûm from the rear. Second unit of Lothlorien blades getting into position. The Olag High loitering with intent as well. The fact that both Mordor armies went quality heavy rather than quantity might hurt the attackers in the long run. They might not have the meat shields to sustain a really aggressive push. But Harad went for a little bit more in terms of numbers. There's some Orc fodder coming up the hill, as well as some Hashari and Serpent Guard. So a good mix there of fodder, assassins and men-at-arms. But the dwarves are here. Lots of Ironfoot halberds. The Trolls of Gundabad moving in as well. It's a pretty comprehensive assault happening already, but the Elven archers are in a pretty ideal spot if they were to turn around to start shooting into this blob, and the Hashari in particular will do very poorly if that is to happen. But the Lothlorien blades here easily defeating the damaged units of Guardians of Khan Dûm that move forward. Meanwhile, you can see here the Nazgul in very close proximity, and the Guardians of Khan Dûm do need help, and they are going to receive it from the Nazgul. That cavalry is also going to be an ever-present... It's going to be in the back of their mind, the attackers, as well, as this fight goes on. They're going to have to bear that in mind. If they commit forward everything, the cavalry is immediately going to charge forwards and recharge the entire attacking army. Lothlorien blades finishing off the Guardians of Khan Dûm. Now the blob fight is beginning. The elves are on the front line here, but now with the Nazgul in close proximity, I'm not sure how well this fight is going to go. The Guardians of Khan Dûm are shaken though. If the Nazgul are here on their own, the elves will win. But with backup, the Nazgul should be enough to cause some damage. There are the Hashari shadows. Body-piercing projectiles. But they're going to find it a little bit difficult to get into the proper position to actually shoot. There's a lot of skirmish fire. Crossbow bolts and Elven archers. Oof. Meanwhile, you can see here that the Blackwatch Legion and the Black Legion of Barad-dûr are pushing these units out of the way, but there's a lot of elves and dwarves in the way. And this catapult doing tremendous damage. The push also aided by trolls. The question is whether they have the manpower to actually make this stick. The Ironfoot warriors doing their best. The Imladra sentries. One Blackwatch Legionnaire managed to push his way through the line and get to the catapult crew, and now the trolls are also doing the same thing. What I will say though is that they're going to need to continue to push men up, otherwise this assault will fizzle out. Black Legion and Blackwatch Legion are both going to do very poorly, particularly against Imladra's Guardians. Camera is also difficult to control when the frame rate gets this bad, but I'm actually a fan of this. Dark Elven King sending forward some of his elites already because he sees the danger that this push represents, and too often I've seen defenders be too reluctant to commit their elites forward, like they just want to save them for the end. But sometimes you need to commit them forward sooner, and I'm glad that Dark Elven King has done this, because they do need to, because the Great Shield units have pushed back the defenders quite a long way. But if they do enough damage to the attackers here, they can make them rue this decision. What have we got here? The Imladris Sentinels doing some damage in the back lines here for the Southron Archers, aided by the Gwathi Rockdaw and the Lothlorien Mounted Company, so the cavalry trap has been sprung. They're now going to try and do some damage. Norreturno Cavalry, the Orc fodder is here, but I think the Elven Cavalry is just going to completely bypass them and try and go for softer targets. In fact, I think it's about time we turn down to half speed with all of this going on. Meanwhile, the Ashari Shadows are here. If they got a charge from the Lothlorien Mounted Company, that could be the end of a lot of this body-piercing ammunition. Meanwhile, the Gwathi Rockdaw charging forwards. It is only into Harajam Spearmen, but you would still imagine these High Elven Knights would get a large amount of kills just by charging into basic militia units. And obviously they are Knights, so they are also very, very durable. The Imladris Sentinels are wavering, and that's because they're in melee with Trollmen, which are certainly no pushovers. Another unit of Lothlorien Mounted Company, charging back and forth. Again, this cavalry now is going to be causing chaos in the back lines of the Norreturno Cavalry. The Norreturno Cavalry actually has the armour upgrade as well, which is good to see. Couldn't zoom in on that early on in that giant blob of Elven infantry. That Lothlorien Mounted Company is being killed off now by the Hashari Shadows. This High Elven Cavalry needs to move in and shut them down, ideally. Here comes the Gwathi Rockdaw, which again, proving themselves to be extremely difficult to shut down. Charging into the Hashari Stalkers. The Harajam trying their best to sort of stem the bleeding back here, but still the cavalry doing a very good job. Well, let's go and see where the attackers were making some progress a moment ago. And they are still... Well, there's some trolls up on the wall, so they've managed to get to the door, and they're now engaging. There's also the Witch Realm Blackguard, so now the fact that they were able to get up here means they are now going to be able to systematically destroy the defensive skirmishers which are up here, and a lot of very elite units as well. Temple Executioners and Witch Realm Blackguard up here doing that, which, to be fair, the defensive skirmishers were doing a lot of damage down here, but the push that the attackers had going on is starting to fizzle out. The Khazad-dûm infantry is now coming forward, which will certainly do much to help out. But you can see over here that the push that the Great Shield units sort of facilitated, you know, it's looking a little bit less scary, although to be fair there are still Nazgul, Witch Realm Hammerguard down here as well. You know, it's going to take a little bit more to sort of ensure that this defensive line stays strong. There are still those black blocks, however. Meanwhile, down here, not a huge assault happening down here. I mean, there's still the Guardians of Kharn-dûm, there's still a unit of Nazgul, but it's actually very rare that you see the defenders have a relatively comfortable time of it in the lower section of the fortress. The attackers have pretty much thrown all their eggs into one basket, going into the keep directly via the main gate. Down here, they seem to be doing okay for themselves, the defenders, which means they may possibly have some reserves that they could send up into the keep should they need to. Well, let's go and see how the cavalry is getting on. The Elder Enway Haru Myro still charging around doing damage, but they were shaken, I think, for a little while there. The Gwathi Rockdaw, however, the Knights, huge damage there, getting into the Demons of the Desert, no less. A good catch. Eventually, of course, all this cavalry is going to be destroyed. There's no way that it will be able to continue. But that was a risky charge, because the Champions of Nafra, obviously a very juicy target indeed off a charge, but there are Southron pikemen in close proximity, which could be the end of the Haru Myro. They're already shaken. They're taking shots in the back from the Hashari Shadows as well. So the cavalry force at this point is almost entirely spent. There's some Temple Executioners over there. The Gwathi Rockdaw, 19 Knights is still a decent amount. Yeah, there go the Haru Myro. So really they're down to a singular unit at this point. Going over here to sort of try and secure the lower fortress. Do some damage with the Knights going right along there, the Numenorian Shadow Guard. They are not going to enjoy being charged by the best cavalry that Imladris has to offer. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers trying to assist in the advance, as well as the Minas Morgul Bodyguard. But it's all javelins on the front line. Again, they have a lot of skirmish power down here in the shape of javelins and reclaimers. Harajam archers as well, just adding a little bit of support, but I'm not entirely sure whether they've got enough infantry. Minas Morgul Bodyguard is okay, but the elves have got, you know, plentiful resources down here. It's up here where the most significant fight is happening. The Witch Realm Blackguard and the Temple Execution is able to secure most of this top wall. It's really only a single unit of Ironfoot crossbowmen left, and as soon as the Blackguard get over here to help this one mountain troll, the Ironfoot crossbows will not be able to stand against Witch Realm Blackguard. Down here though, Imladra's sentries using their pikes. Ooh, this could be a real turning point. The Witchers are here. Been a little while since we've seen the Witchers in action. There are only 6 of them though, so they've already taken some damage. Ooh, this could be what decides the fight actually, because the attack has not gone too well for the attackers so far. Technically speaking, the defenders can afford to be very pleased with their day's work, and the Witchers not finding their mark, and now the crossbows going into guard mode and immediately starting to shoot down into them, I think. Or actually, are they going into the infantry blob down there? All it's going to take is one good volley from the Witchers. They managed to kill a catapult, but what they really need to do is hit this section here. I think they're going after the Blacklock Engineers, when really what they should be doing is going after this blob here. Imladris Guardians, Obsidian Guard, Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin. That would be a devastating shot, especially with a lot of Khazad-dûm's army still making their way up the ramp. What is happening down here? Temple Executioners. I think that's going to be the end of the Gwathi Rock Door. The Temple Executioners standing firm in the face of a charge from them, and the Olag High moving in to support. This battle has really kicked into high gear now. Moran Halberds moving to the aid of the Minas Morgul bodyguard. So a little bit more of a genuine assault happening down here now, but even still, the Lothlorien infantry is still in a relatively good place to keep holding the line. And as soon as the Karos Galadhon's Guardians move forward as well, that's going to be extremely difficult to break through. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers in close proximity, which could help, but even still, the defenders are looking pretty good at this point in time, actually, I think. Sons of Durin moving into position as well. Blacklock Engineers trying their best to do as much damage as they can, even though the angle is not ideal for them. If you want to get the most out of their body-piercing projectiles, you really want them to be firing on a linear arc. Oh, there are the Witchers again. And again, I still think they're going for the Blacklock Engineers, which they are very deadly. But the Witchers have very limited ammunition, honestly. I don't know what happened there. I think that hit the top of the artillery piece, actually. Bit of a buggy hitbox there. But there's a lot of elite Dwarven infantry down here, which they could be going for. Which the Blacklocks are powerful, but now you can see the Witchers have been mown down. All it would have taken, I think, would have been 1 or 2 volleys into this blob, and the attackers probably would have won this fight. As it is, however, I don't think the Witchers have managed to do as much damage as they would have wanted. Here come Khazad-dûm, however. What is this? Yeah, that was a little bit better. Right into the Swordmasters. Huge damage done there. Killing around 30 men with a single blast, and there's only 1 Witcher left.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
I think this is going to be the end of him, however. I think they're finally going to kill him off. That was a direct hit on him, and he dies. But not before he was finally able to do some significant damage to the defensive line over here. But it is going to come down, I think, to Khazad-dûm. Again, I'm a little bit nervous about zooming in on these fights down here. I will attempt it. You can see the wreckage of that shield wall push that the attackers made with their Blackwatch units earlier. There's still a few stragglers from the Dwarven army back here. There's also still some elves and Erebor dwarves over here, but now Khazad-dûm's army is here in full force, attempting to do as much. Well, they're going to crush this area over here. The question is, will they be able to advance through this section as well? Blackwatch Engineers, or Blacklock Engineers I should say, trying to do as much damage as they can. Ironfoot crossbows going to be coming down to the lower level, it would seem, just to try and help support the front line. Some Eldar Etar moving in as well, just to try and shore things up. The Witch Realm Blackguard are on the front line, so it might be time for the defenders to start thinking about committing some more resources to the front line, because it might be now or never, honestly. The attackers have committed forward basically everything they have of significance, whether it be up there or down here. Some Sylvan Spears have been committed forward to the front line. Maetha Ilazgalan trying to come forward. The Olag High causing a lot of damage. The Khazad-dûm Reclaimers also doing the same. It could come down to the fact that the attackers have been able to use some skirmish power in key areas. The Witchers ultimately maybe not the devastating force that the attackers would have hoped. But they still did a lot of damage. With that final few volleys, they were able to cut down a lot of the defensive infantry, a lot of elven pikes. You can see here the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers have clearly been at work, killing off a lot of Lothlorien archers. Athel Tirith over there. Still a lot of Lothlorien infantry in reserve. Meanwhile, still some troll drummers on the front lines. Here comes another elite unit down here though, the Highborns of Erebor, which is good to see. Trying to shore things up a little bit. I don't know how much skirmish power the defenders still have. Maybe some God Helene and Haru Quinga. If they were in this position over here, they would be able to shoot right down into them. Still the Black Blocks are in play though. Because I still think from a defensive point of view, they're going to need a lot of skirmish support to just bring down a lot of these units. You can see now that the Catapult is in here as well. Which ultimately is a risk, because it could get a lot of friendly fire as well. Some Nazgul on the front line. A real mess. Again, I don't know how much ammunition these Elven skirmishers still have. The Sindar archers are firing, but I'm not sure what at. Anyway, it might be time to go back up to 1 speed. It's a risk with the frame rate. Here come the God Helene and the Haru Quinga, who are presumably out of ammunition, but the God Helene in particular obviously double as a very strong elite infantry unit. This could be a case of another push happening though, with all of these dwarves coming forward. More Blacklock ammunition being poured into the blob. What is happening down here? Will the Karas Galadhon's Guardians be moved forward? I assume that they are waiting for the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers to be out of ammunition, but by then it might already be too late. The Elven line is already struggling a little bit. There's another unit of Nazgul in here after all, doing a lot of damage to these Athel Tirith and Sylvan Spears. Here comes another unit of Lothlorien Spears getting into position. Maetha Ilazgalan doing some nice damage to the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers in response. Again, do the attackers have anything that can really capitalise on this advance though? Not really. They've got some Olag High in reserve. Other than the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers and the Nazgul, they don't really have anything down here that's of too great a concern in melee. The Karas Galadhon's Guardians should be able to hold down the fort sort of all on their lonesome. It looks like they're actually going to pull back though, which might be a good idea if Khazad-dûm are still charging forward. They still need to keep these infantry units in reserve, I suppose, as well, otherwise they can just, the siege towers can just be used. It looks as though that is what's going to be happening as well. The Olag High might use the tower. Oof, that frame rate. A nice hit there on the God Helene from the offensive catapult. Here come Khazad-dûm. Now's the time to commit forward everything. Try and hold down this line. That's a lot of friendly fire though. That is a lot of friendly fire from that catapult, which is the issue. As they push forward, they are also going to put themselves at risk of killing themselves with their own catapult fire. Haru Quinga maybe just trying to get out of the way. But look at this, the Dwarven push in full force. I mean, this is it really. This is all or nothing from an attacking point of view, because if this push fails, they're not going to have enough resources to mount another assault. And there's still some elite units back here. Gwathi Arthan, Haru Masil, Sindar archers. This elite unit's still on the front line as well. I mean, there's still quite a lot of Obsidian Guard for a start. Whatever happened to the Karas Galadhon's Guardians? Oh, they did turn around and they decided to hold down this line, which now this Elven front line is looking much, much more solid. There's still some Nazgul, but I would think the addition of these Elven pikes, the support the Nazgul have is mainly fodder. There goes the Erebor General though. And again, these Elven units still in reserve. There is another unit of Temple Executioners coming down here, which should be able to defeat the Lothlorien Blades. The Shadow Guard will not defeat this unit of Lothlorien Blades though. There's still that unit of Sword Masters in reserve as well. But again, the attackers have committed forward basically everything. Look at this. Khazad-dûm just trying to force their way through sheer power, which has paid dividends, but you know, they're also, you know, the Mithril Guard are the one sort of exceptional unit they have. And it is costing them. As they push through, there's a lot of dead Khazad-dûm dwarves on the floor here, as well as a lot of dead Erebor and Erebor dwarves as well. But you can see now that the defenders still have a pretty decent chunk of infantry along here. Here come the Lothlorien Swordmasters, who, seeing the danger of these javelins, reposition themselves from down here, so keeping them in reserve proved to be a good move in the end. And the Mahud Beast Hunters, or Muhad Beast Hunters in this patch I should say, are going to find themselves no match at all for Lothlorien Swordmasters. Utter chaos erupting. The Mithril Guard on the front line here, now having to fight against Heru Masil and Gwathi Arthand. What is this? Champions of Nafarat. There's still some Sindar archers in reserve as well. Crossbowmen. Heru Quinga. Temple Executioners getting ready to attack from that side as well. The God Helene. So there's still some Imladris units in reserve. If I were them, I would commit them forwards, because if this line down here falls apart, Khazad-dûm's work will be complete. Ironfoot crossbows firing into that blob of Khazad-dûm units, which that could be the big break the defenders have been looking for. What is going on down here? Yeah, the defenders are starting to push back against the attackers down here. They really don't have enough resources to keep this assault up. At this point, it really is just Haradrim archers and Khazad-dûm reclaimers. You can see over here the Orc javelins are shaken and tired. The Lothlorien blades trying to combine their forces to sort of slow down these temple executioners, which it looks as though those Heshari stalkers up on the walls are sort of giving the temple executioners a bit of a hand. But this honestly is the secondary engagement at this point in time. Whoever wins will be able to sort of have a little bit more reinforcements where they're required, but for the most part this is the main fight now. Khazad-dûm and Harad trying to muscle their way through. The Obsidian Guard still just tanking out a ton of damage. They've only lost 7 more units since last we saw them, and they've been put in a really disadvantageous position. Here comes some Southron archers. The Witchround Blackguard, defeat is a distinct possibility. Having to go up against Lothlorien Swordmasters, some elite Dwarven infantry as well. There's Heshari everywhere, there's forces from Angmar. It really is a complete mess. And now you can see here, Temple Executioners moving in. The Sindar Archers, though, are no slouches, and with how much damage the Temple Executioners have already taken, the Sindar Archers might just be enough to win this. Although Ending Flame is going to try and pull them out by going through them. That's not a good move. That's sloppy. Here come the Elven Pikes in single file line. That looks kind of goofy. Yeah, I think ultimately the defenders' desire once again to be conservative and keep these individual units back in reserve it might come back to bite them. You know, this might be the sort of thing which costs them the entire game. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, being conservative with your units rarely works in this sort of situation. If the attackers are pushing, you need to meet that push with, you know, appropriate force. And time again I've seen the defenders make the same mistakes of just, oh well, maybe if we just keep some units in reserve it'll work out. No, it doesn't. It won't. You'll just be overwhelmed. And if that's what ends up costing them the game, I will be a little bit gutted, to be honest with you, because I feel as though the defenders could have done so well. That is a general. I think that might have been Harad's general, or it might have been the High Elven general. This again is very sloppy play from the Lothlorien player. He's committed his pikes forwards, and now they're just going to be butchered by a combination of axe throwers and javelins. So in the end, the attackers are going to win down here, and they needn't have. You know, the defenders had them right where they wanted them, and then they pushed forward and allowed themselves to. You know, it's good play from the attackers. You know, obviously the basics sort of split your skirmishers up so so whoever's attacking them can only go after one. And unfortunately, the Lothlorien player fell right into that trap, hook, line, and sinker. Also getting attacked from the Southron archers. Still the Lothlorien Swordmasters and the Obsidian Guard trying their best. Khazad-dûm still in a strong position. Now the Imladris sentries are down here. The God Helene are needed. Only 28 of them though. I'm not sure whether that's going to be enough to reverse the defenders' fortunes. Still some Heruquinga though, so still some ranged firepower coming their way. Orc fodder getting ready to advance into the town centre as well, although it is only orc fodder, it is still the sort of thing which if they charge them into the back of these pikes will make life a little bit more difficult. God Helene still have ammunition. Interesting. You know, at this point as well, it's starting to get to the point where Khazad-dûm are going to need a little bit more support. I mean, out here, the attackers still have plenty of units. Obviously, some of them Snaga, some of them just basic pikemen. They've still got some Witch-Round Blackguard, they've still got a few Hammer Guard as well, some Hammers of Gundabad as well coming forwards. But these Obsidian Guard and Lothlorien Swordmasters acting as an effective blocker here for all of these units, which could really do with getting into the town centre as quickly as they are able. I wonder how much ammunition those Khazad-dûm Reclaimers still have. The Shari Stalker's still there. The God Helene. They need to be committed to melee, honestly. They're getting beaten on by this one Nazgul. Mithril Guard on the front line. I believe at this point the attackers will win. There's Demons of the Desert up there as well. That's a rout from the Orc fodder, but again, that's no big deal. The Ironfoot crossbows trying to do what damage they can, and they have been effective. And I feel as though the Erebor player in particular, from a defending point of view, has done his job to the letter. He's managed to get his crossbows into lethal positions. He committed forward his elite units quickly when he saw that they were being pushed against. The same cannot be said for his elven allies, however. The use of the cavalry early on could have been far more effective. And the Lothlorien player, particularly late on here, has made some rather sloppy errors which could end up pushing the battle beyond the defenders. This is going to be the end of the Lothlorien Swordmass and the Obsidian Guard as well, which is going to open the floodgates to more reinforcements, Temple Executioners, some Hammers of Gundabad as well. Snaga stopping the Ironfoot crossbows from firing as much as they were before. These Orc fodder, well, there's some Nazgul moving into place. Engaging the Heruquinga in melee. I'd be surprised if these fodder didn't rout in the face of the Elven Pikes and the God Helene, although maybe the Nazgul are going to be encouraging them. But yeah, there were 3 mighty pushes throughout this battle. You could say there was only one, really. It never really stopped. But I feel as though that is going to be all she wrote. And the defenders could have had this. They could have had this. But I think more and more now, this battle is getting beyond them. The lower fortress is lost. Catapult being pushed forward. The Witch-Round Blackguard are coming in, even though they are very damaged. The Gwaith Arthand have held the line for a long time, but at this point, without the support of the crossbows, they're going to be fighting a losing battle here against Khazad-dûm. Khazad-dûm, if that push from Khazad-dûm had failed, then the defenders would have won. But as it is, I think the attackers were able to make that push stick.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
Catapults, well, that's risky. An ill-placed catapult shot is the sort of thing which could send your fodder routing. That is also the sort of thing which could kill off an entire unit of Nazgul if it's an ill-placed shot. Killing off a couple of elves. God Helene doing their best in melee, but again, the Nazgul are here. 4 units of Nazgul is a lot to deal with, in all fairness. There's the Hammer Guard. Blackguard are up there as well, both of which pretty damaged at this point. They were part of that push, going toe-to-toe with the likes of the Obsidian Guard, but ultimately the attackers just had their things sorted better than most. And again, I'm often quite harsh on the defenders, purely because they need to make less mistakes if they're going to win, and it's also quite frustrating when you see a battle like this in which the defenders could have won it. They could have won it. With better cavalry play and with just less mistakes all round. Less being conservative, more being bold and putting your elite units in earlier. And I feel as though the attacking pushes would have failed. But I think the Elven players in particular were far too eager to sort of preserve the lives of their elite troops for some sort of final stand. And in the end, this is what happens. You simply don't have enough left in the late game, enough left in the tank to face the attackers. when they have sort of worked together in tandem as well as they have. There goes Haldir, dying at Helm's Deep, which, you know, he'll never, you know, that's always going to be canon, no matter what. Obviously the Blackguard. I do feel as though the Dwarven player deserves quite a lot of credit though. You watch, he'll have the least amount of kills now, but I still feel as though, you know, the way he got his skirmishers into position, if he hadn't have done that, then the attacking pushes would have been even more successful than they have been. Here are the Nazgul. Obviously, it was a lot of Nazgul, but also I feel as though the attackers, with how they went for a couple of very high quality but low quantity Mordor armies, could have been used in the defenders' favour, particularly with the cavalry. Like, there were Olag High on station, sure, but if you start to do a lot of damage with cavalry charges to armies that have gone for a quality approach rather than a quantity one, they can very quickly start to be less useful, particularly in a siege environment like this. As it is though, you know, the cavalry it did do some work out there, the cavalry, to be fair. But it was mainly disruptive, and I don't feel as though it got enough kills to be worth the expense in the end. I feel as though it needed to be, a big cavalry push needs to be something which you take the enemy by surprise with and do a lot of damage early. And I do feel as though if the attackers sort of saw all the cavalry pour out of the fortress and went, no, 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 you can't attack us while we're still moving into position, I feel as though that speaks poorly of the attackers, because the only way that cavalry play like that works is if you take the enemy by surprise, and when they're still moving around and trying to set up, you're charging into them. So that is my criticisms of the cavalry play from Imladris and Lothlorien basically entirely come down to the fact of whether or not the attackers told them not to charge them early or not. If they did, then I feel as though the attackers, you know, that's a black mark against the attackers in my opinion, if that's what happened. Particularly when you outnumber the enemy by 2 armies, you should be willing to give the defenders, cut them a bit of a break, cut them some slack. But if not, then, you know, my criticisms of the cavalry still stand. Just a massive blob over here. Still some Elven pikes fighting hard. Yes, the attackers are going to be victorious. In the end, that Khazad-dûm push a little bit too much. And obviously this is 0.96, so Khazad-dûm very, very powerful. And ultimately, if it hadn't have been Khazad-dûm, and if it had been someone like Rune, maybe this fight could have gone differently, even with all of the factors that I mentioned. But yeah, the dwarves getting the most kills. Again, not too surprising considering the positions of their crossbows. Imladris getting the fewest, and again, not too surprised by that either, purely because their cavalry, a lot of their power was bound up in their cav. And in the end, I feel as though they could have used that better. But again, that is entirely dependent on how sporting the attackers were being. Again, if the attackers had told me to hold back with the cavalry early on, I would not have listened. I would have charged Angmar, and I would have done tons of damage, because I would have been well within my rights to do so. But let's see what did the damage for Angmar. Witch-Round Blackguard, obviously, in a sustained fight like this, the Witch-Round Blackguard are excellent. The Witchers getting, again, 101 kills, which, considering a lot of their sort of shots went wayward and didn't get a lot of damage done, still did fine. Obviously, it was when they were down to 1 unit model, essentially, and they did some damage to that Lothlorien infantry. The Blackwatch Legion obviously started the initial push. The Guardians of Khazad-dûm got butchered in the lower fortress, actually, one of the rare occasions where they do terribly. Catapult, you know, obviously, mainly the Angmar Catapult was designed to just sort of knock down the outer walls. The Hammer Guard did well as well. Obviously higher damage than the Blackguard, but also a little bit more designed with shock in mind rather than a sustained fight. But yeah, a good fight overall. Still a close Helm's Deep fight. Obviously some very elite defensive armies, which in the end I feel as though they could have done a little better. You know, it could have gone... But again, it's weird, because I do feel as though if the attackers asked that cavalry not to charge them initially, like wait until we're sat up before you start using your cavalry, I feel as though that sort of tilts my ire in the favour of the attackers, to be honest with you. But again, that's assumptions. You know, the whole battle, basically, my perspective on the whole battle hinges on whether that was the case or not. Because if the attackers were fine with the defenders charging them right from the off, then Angmar, by all rights, should have had their army crippled before they ever reached the walls. But if they did, then there wasn't really much else that the defenders could have done with their cavalry other than sort of put them in the back of the map and try and use them a little bit later on. And then the attackers were always going to have something, to try and slow down the cavalry. And while Imladris did their best with their cavalry, when they didn't use them early on, it was always going to be a little bit more tricky. And obviously, in the defence, they should have committed forward their elites sooner, just like the dwarves, because the attackers were very keen on just sort of pushing right through, using brute force, and the only way to stop that is to meet aggression with aggression. To use, obviously the skirmishers did their job from a dwarven perspective particularly, but they needed to commit forward more infantry sooner. More elven pikes would have done well as well. And also, just minor little mistakes like the Sindar archers trying to retreat through the temple executioners, the Karascaladon's guardians trying to chase down several units of skirmishers. Never going to go well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and this will probably be the final battle the final thing I put up on my channel in 2018, and here's to a good 2019. Hopefully more new and exciting things both from Reforged and from other things will wait in the year to come. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.